Why strategic plan strategy huddle, keeping momentum after your retreat?
How do we keep our momentum going after we've had these wonderful offsites? And so many times we visit in great places where we have these offsites, wonderful retreat centers and so forth, and then next thing you know, we have to go back into the workplace on the following day, and the momentum tends to be like air being let out of a balloon.
Well, that's a question that I'm not sure that the air being let out of a balloon, that's a little harsh, but I think that people just get caught up with the day-to-day, you know, and so I'm sure that if you're on the line today and you're responsible, you're an outsourced entity, if you're a consultant, you know how hard it can be to keep the momentum going with clients. It's, of course, our job to do so. If you're an internal resource, it's just sometimes one more thing that is sort of an added duty, if you will. And so what are some things that you might consider, arrows you might consider adding to your quiver, knowing fully that this is equal parts, well, it's probably more about organizational development than it is about strategy insofar as getting the strategic plan adopted into the organization and moving. So with that in mind, let's look at a couple of tips, and I'm just going to pull from just some of the best practices that we've been implementing and things that have worked for us. And if we could go to the next slide, please. We wanted to ask you in the chat box over on the right-hand side, if you would think about this question as we're walking through this segment. What is one action implemented to keep your momentum after your retreat that you might like to share with everybody else on the call today? And we'll collect everybody's answers at the end. So just, you know, as it comes to you, maybe drop your answers in the chat box. So let's go through a couple of things that we found pretty successful. You've heard us talk a lot about the fact that strategic planning is a business process, and I would keep saying that because just so oftentimes it still feels like an event. So one of the most important things is to appoint a business process owner. Someone needs to own the process of strategic management in the organization, and certainly the CEO owns the results of that, and he or she needs to be driving the direction of the organization, but someone needs to manage it just like you manage just like you manage a project plan. And you can see, I just put a little example up on the screen. This is just the beginnings of a project plan that we're using for a client currently, and you can see we've got it just exactly. It happens to be an MS project. It could certainly be in Excel. We manage, and we would recommend to anybody who's doing this internally as well as externally, we manage it just like you manage a project with very specific tasks and deliverables and expectations. So, and the most important thing about this project plan is that it doesn't end after the plan's done, and we know that too, but again, really clearly goes through identifying when the strategy updates are, who is supposed to be attending, what we bring to those meetings, all that good stuff. So one item is appoint a process owner. The next item is, and you've seen this slide before as well if you've joined us, and that is schedule your strategy update. And I'm just going to use update meetings right away. In fact, maybe you want to schedule them before you start the retreat. And that is to say, and this is just an example of what a quarterly set of activities might look like. So we've had our annual strategy update, looking at that over on the left-hand side. We've rolled out the plan, and then this particular slide actually has strategy sessions or strategy updates on a monthly basis. 2-hour sessions at the leadership level, and then a longer one at a quarterly basis. That may or may not work for you. Maybe you want to do the whole thing once a quarter. Some people think that's too long. So this needs to be something that works for your organization. But I really feel strongly about the fact that once you go from that retreat, making it to the next strategy update session is where so much energy and effort needs to be focused to just get it to that next place. So it starts to become part of the organization, and that may already be working for you, may already have it all going, and so for you, it's how do we make those meetings even more effective. So another tip, kind of thinking about some things that we are really passionate about, is communicating to motivate and inspire. So I just have a couple examples up on the screen. The one that's on the left-hand side is just a recent communication tool that we used for that particular client to communicate out to the larger organization about the strategic direction for 2010. And on the front side, you can't see it, it's too small, and it's that's sort of intentional, but because it's a privately held organization. But on the front side is the mission, vision, and values, and on what's underneath that on the back side is actually the 2010. It's the long-term strategic objectives and the 2010 goals, and this is the communication tool that they'll be using to roll out their plan this year, and then of course carrying it beyond. The other item over there for the school district, that happens to be where I am right now, this particular PowerPoint presentation, that's of course just the first slide. We worked pretty hard on creating a really engaging presentation that we used for the board as well as for the teachers and the administrators to get people really excited about the direction of the district. This particular PowerPoint presentation was also used with the county as well as with the Alaska State Legislature. So really trying to leverage communication tools, but also to get people excited as opposed to just looking at a bunch of bullet points. So motivate and inspire. Really big fan of making sure, as another tip, that everyone can see their quote-unquote my stuff. And I know that particular statement is grammatically incorrect, but we know that one of the things that needs to happen in order to go from ideas on flip charts to something that we can actually execute against, and I as a staff member can take movement on, is I need something. This is just an example here. From our application, you can make your own as well, of a list of things that I'm responsible for doing as a team member, as a department director, to drive the long-term strategic objectives or strategic priorities for the organization. So this is, again, it's small text, but the item that is in gray is the bigger picture, longer-term statements, and the items underneath them are the breakdown at either the district, in this case it's the district department, or team member level. So really big proponent of not having to go through a big document, but just being able to see the subset of things that I'm responsible for doing. The next tip that I'd like to just throw out there, and this may or may not resonate, is, and I kind of just said, I think it's important that wherever you are in the organization, that it's really hard to focus on more than, and 5 is a lot actually, but I just put that out there, no more than maybe 3 to 5 high priority items. So those big things that we're really trying to drive forward. The thing is, and I know we've all seen this, we go into a retreat, there's so many great ideas that come out, and we need to move from, we don't want to lose all this great stuff, to what is putting, sort of as Stephen Covey says, putting the first things first. What are the first things that we need to do in order to start moving some of these bigger ideas forward? And I just call those things high priority items, those things that might come to the front burner. Of course, there's a lot of different ways to go about this, but maybe as a way to, as a gauge, as a filter, to look at the plan at each level of the organization, no matter where you are, from the executive suite down to the individual staff members, that you wouldn't have no more than 5 things that we're really trying to drive forward through the course of 2010. And again, I'm going from long-term to short-term. I kind of like these words as well. I just wrote a blog post on this last week, and it was something that I borrowed and saw from another strategy consultant. I liked her words a lot, and she was talking about thinking about what are the incremental things we need to do, so those short-term high-priority items that come out of your retreat. What are those things that are maybe substantial, sort of midterm, and I call them medium priority items, and then what are those things that are transformational, they're long-term, and they're certainly not lower priority, but they're lower priority as it relates to today, this quarter, this 6 months. And of course, certainly the incremental items should add up to the transformational items. But it's kind of a nice, I think those words are really nice, sort of what's incremental, what's substantial, and what's transformational. And when we kind of think about that, it's a nice way to say, yeah, okay, what are those, maybe 3 or 5 things that are incremental, short-term things that we need to, that I'm responsible for driving forward as it relates to that are going to drive the larger transformational strategies for the organization. So those particular definitions seem to resonate, so I wanted to throw those out there as an idea for making sure that when you're done with your retreat and you have tons of documentation, maybe breaking them down into those 3 buckets. So why do we lose momentum? These are just some 5 things that certainly I've heard, and you've probably heard a lot of these as well, that, as you're into the year, let's fast forward, maybe it's July, and people just don't see any real progress. And when we don't show progress, it just becomes demoralizing, and we all understand that. So I think it's important to show real, substantial, data-based progress, hence having those strategy updates, taking ownership of making sure that your KPIs are updated, showing that the dial is moving, and not to be, let's say, pull the wool over our eyes if things aren't going well, but we need to show some successes and show some progress in some areas of the organization in order to show people that this really does matter. The plan's not relevant. Getting into the year, if we don't have those strategy updates and if we haven't modified our plan because strategic issues have popped up, as Howard mentioned, maybe opportunities pop up that actually we do make a clear choice that are within our strategy that we update our plan accordingly. If the plan's not relevant, it automatically becomes not obsolete, but just not something that we use to make decisions. The third one that I put there is, and I'm sure you've probably heard this before, but that there's no with them, what's in it for me. We threw up that strategy stat in the beginning about making sure that there's rewards. They don't necessarily have to be monetary, but acknowledging achievement. Canceling meetings, that certainly shows that the strategic plan and those strategy discussions are not as important as maybe the operational. And we know, everyone knows that does happen a lot, so someone needs to, that's why we need a process owner to make sure that those strategy updates happen, even if they're just an hour. And then the last one is such a big reason that plans go from, don't make it from flip charts to implementation, and it's because it feels like busy work. And to get a plan dialed in, we all know that it takes a lot of time, and it takes time from a lot of folks in the organization. And until people see it adding value, it really just feels like busy work. So kind of just summarizing then, if you will, some ideas and thoughts that you might think about if you've just gone through a retreat. Making sure that you've got a business process owner, making sure that you already have your strategy update meetings scheduled, motivating and inspiring the organization through effective communication tools. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to hire an ad agency to do that. Certainly there's a lot of different ways you can get people excited and use the templates in PowerPoint to do so. Making sure that folks in the organization have a clear understanding of what my stuff is, what I'm responsible for driving forward, and how I fit into the bigger picture. And then making sure that the plan isn't too big, and that there's maybe no more than 3 to 5 high priority items on any one person's plate. So with that, I'm wondering if anybody wants to chime in and add to the conversation about what you might be doing in your organization or what you've done to add momentum after the retreat to keep the plan going. Ryan, do we have any comments in the chat box?
Yeah, we had a couple people, and I'll just read them. Some real good feedback. The first one was we need to publicize the results for all to see. Hold everyone accountable for delivering on the objectives. And you really want to make sure all the relevant stakeholders are aware of the vision, goals, and objectives. And one thing I thought was key there was that the initial response was to publish the results, and then he clarifies that actually, let's go change publish to publicize. And I think that's a key word there, because you're not just publishing, making it just sit on the shelf kind of thing. Publicize, it's just making sure everybody is aware, and that seems more like a dynamic term that you can get everybody's feedback and keep going with. The other one, another good one, was to post and periodically update the dashboards or scorecards on annual goals and progress. And I know that's one thing that we like around here are the dashboards, and we live and breathe by those in a lot of our plans.
That's great, and I think we all know, and depending upon how far into planning we've come in our organizations, and certainly the more we do this, the better we get. But we know both those ideas, and as well as some of the other ones that we put up on the screen, take time and they take commitment. And certainly that's something, especially in organizations that are really scaled down right now, that we need to take both of those, sort of the best practices for both those ideas, not only publicizing and effective communication and making sure that everybody in the organization not only hears it but understands. And there's a lot of ways to do that, and taking that extra step is so important. It's something we can do even on a scaled down staff. And then making sure that dashboard's updated, and again, that just takes someone to do it, unless it's dynamic data, which is just wonderful. Not everybody has that opportunity. Maybe if it's feeling overwhelming, maybe it's just, maybe really pick 5 numbers or 10. So again, it doesn't feel like it's just, it's a monumentous task to get the data updated.